Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cameron Gallagher from We Are Film, and today we're talking about a new plugin that I just got to try out called Dehancer Pro. Now, Dehancer Pro is kind of like a film emulation plugin for Davinci Resolve or really any OFX software. So any software that can support OFX works well with Dehancer Pro. Now, I'm using Davinci Resolve because it's easier. I prefer to use it. It's what I use. But again, any OFX plugin, this will work anywhere. So again, what it is basically it is a film emulation plugin. So it does everything from different film stocks to film grain. And one of the big two things that I saw was the bloom effect and the halation that are typically happen with film lenses or film cameras and film stocks that obviously you don't see on digital very often. So the fact that these two are in there, and we'll talk about those in a little bit, are really huge. And there's some other stuff too. Obviously, they've done some really key testing. There's a ton of different film stocks we'll talk about in a minute. And yeah, there's some really, really cool stuff involved. So anyway, let's jump into it. But just to give you an idea, right now, the Dehancer Pro is $349. Now, we have nothing to do with Dehancer. They did send us this to check out, but it is not anything that, we're not getting paid to do this or anything like that. This does come with 2 licenses, though, too, so that also is really nice. And they have some different other versions where if you just wanted to buy the grain or the actual film profile, stuff like that. So super great deal, and I'll talk more about that in a second here because I am very, very happy, and there's a few features in this that I think are huge. So let's jump into it. So, excuse me, here in Davinci Resolve, now we have the normal color page plugin, and of course we have to install it. And once that's done already, you can see Dehancer Pro 3.3, which I'm using because I have Davinci Resolve 17. So I'm going to add a new node because I like to always just do it on the new node. And right now I am in the Blackmagic Design color space, and I'm in the film look. So you can always change if you need to, but we're going to add this to the new node. And now the Dehancer's on. At first, you're like, wow, that looks awful. And don't worry, it's because right now we're in Rec 709. Now, if you had a Rec 709 clip, so let's say your footage was in Rec 709, then you're fine. You can go from there. In our case, I'm going to use the actual input conversion. So I'm going to choose camera, Blackmagic Design. You can see a ton of other cameras. The Pocket 4K, they told me that this is pretty much close to the same, so it's fairly close enough. So we're just going to use this for now because it seems to work just fine, and I don't have any issues at all. So I'm going to show you this clip right here of this guy singing, and we're going to do this on here. So let's go through some of the settings. So the first thing is there's the exposure compensation, which this could be just compensating for the possibility of what the actual LUT, in a sense, or plugin may be doing. There's defringe, which, to be honest with you, I don't see too much difference. And also the radius and that, again, I don't see too much difference in those. So let's talk about the film now. So this is where, obviously, the massive amount of film stocks are. And I'll tell you right now, this is the most film stocks. Like, it's incredible. They have some really wild-looking films in here. So, I mean, if you're looking for the most film stock emulation, literally don't look any further. This has by far the most. They have some of the staples, obviously, like the the Kodak Visions, and I'm honestly going to probably stick with the Kodak Vision 250D. This film and this music video in particular has a very classic cinema look, so we want to keep that classic cinema. Now, there's a cool little button right here called Auto Expand, and that can expand for the exposure to be basically 100%, so that can come in handy, but not in our case. One thing that is huge is this push-pull exposure, and this is basically emulating when you push and pull film. And the great part is that it actually changes certain aspects. Now, granted, you can only do it about 2 stops up and down, but it actually changes the real aspect of the film as if you were pushing and pulling it. So you can tell there's a little bit of a color shift involved and a little bit of an exposure shift. So that's really cool. That can come in handy if you're emulating maybe a certain film stock, pushed or pulled a certain stop or 2. So that's awesome. So there's also the expansion. This is just the black point. Obviously, if you wanted to change your black point, I need to enable it. That might be helpful. So we could change our black point and then change our white point as well. For this, we want it to be nice and bright, so I'm probably going to bring that up and then bring the contrast down. I want to flatten some of that, so probably right about there, and I might bring the white point about there. You can also do Luma, and there's color mode. I couldn't tell you what's going on behind the hood, but there's also an analyze current frame to help that. And we're not going to use that for now, but I like the manual one. So I'm actually going to turn off the grain for a second just so you can see some of the other stuff that's going on. So there's also the color. This is great if you want to add certain hues in or out. So for instance, maybe I'd want to pull this more towards cyan and something like that right there. So you get a little more of like a magenta red sort of look. You can see if we turn that off, you get that more magenta red, less of that kind of like yellowy look. And you can preserve, and of course the impact, which is basically how much it's affecting it. So that's some color stuff you can work with. And then next we have film grain. This is obviously one of the biggest things, and there's a lot of stuff here. So that's a lot of film grain. Personally, I don't want that much film grain. I'm going to bring the resolution down, maybe the size up a touch, bring the amount. Actually, I might bring the size down, the amount down. Let's get rid of it in the shadows. Let's keep the midtones and highlights around there. And let's bring the chroma down. So you can see that when we actually play this back here, there's no grain, and there's the grain on top. It adds a little bit. I might add a little bit more, actually. A little bit more size and a little more amount. Yeah, it adds a nice, obviously, touch. Now, I'm going to turn it off, though, for now, just so you can see some of these other things. So, for instance, this is the halation. So, if we, this one's really hard to see. So, let's zoom in a little bit here. And when we enable it, you can start to see there's a little bit of red glow around the edges, right? And if we bring up some of these parameters, you can see that a little bit changes there. Let's do high soft. Let's do amplify. This is where you can really see it. So, you can really see the halation there. We're going to leave that pretty high because the amplify, because that's where it probably would be. So you can see off and on. We can also change the hue of it, which I don't want to change too much. The scattering, which we can leave there, and the impact overall. Let's bring it back up. So there we go. There's our halation. And obviously, again, emulating, it's subtle, but in this scene, it's subtle. It could also be like really, not subtle in other scenes. Let's turn it off again just for a minute. We're going to add these all back out at the end, but just so you can see the bloom. So right now, if we enable the bloom, let's go back in. Oops. So let's turn the bloom off and let's turn it back on. You can see there's not a whole lot, but if we bring those highlights up, you can see there's a little bit of that glow starting. And of course, if we amplify it, that's too much. But, we might want to have it like right about there, because if we turn it off, that's about what it would probably be in actual film. So we can amplify it. We can do the same thing, hue and saturation of it. We can also save the light. So that's kind of like, saving your highlights, which we want to probably go about midway. And obviously, because we put quite a bit here and we're bringing up the amplification. So if we turn that off and on, and if you click on mask mode, you can actually see what it's doing, which is nice. So you can see what's actually being affected. So in this case, it's just a skin. We want to enable that. Let's enable that halation, and let's enable that film grain. Cool. So we also have down here three. So there's also the vignette, which we'll put the vignette on. So that's obviously going to add a vignette. You can add the size of the vignette, the feather. Now, it's not crazy obvious right now because depends on how much you do. To be honest with you, I don't use a vignette that often. So me personally, I wouldn't use this that often, but obviously it's there, and that's a huge factor, and that's awesome. The next is film breadth and the gate weave. These are kind of go hand in hand. These are ways that you can actually distort the film. So you can kind of see when we enable this one. Let's turn it on here. So let's bring this way up, or actually let's bring that down. You can see it's like a flicker effect, and depending on how we do that, we can actually add that where it's just kind of tiny up here in the highlights. That's something that film does, especially in the highlights, they kind of have a flicker to them. So again, that's something we can do. I'm not going to add it to this because I think it might be just distracting. And then there's also the gate weave. And obviously this is something that you might want to do if you wanted to add more of a certain look. This kind of has like a weird jitter and motion to the film. So these are just obviously adding the amount, the translation, or in film breathe, you have the period, the exposure, the tonal contrast, color, and impact. And gate weave, you have the period, translation, rotation, impact. So those are really emulating the look of film. Personally, I don't use those that often just because, unless I was trying to really emulate like 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter. But in this case, I just want kind of a film look. Now, there's also the false color button down here, which is really nice because it shows you kind of where your exposures are. So we can see that we're right around that range where we want to be. Maybe it's a little bit hot, but I don't mind that for this. And then, of course, we can actually mix back in the entire thing. Now, one of the hugest things that I love about Dehancer is the fact that you can actually export a 333 or 33 by 33 by 33 LUT out of whatever you made. So the great part is let's say you were working on another project or something else and you wanted to keep these LUTs for this look, you can export this as a LUT. So that's huge, and I think that makes just such a big difference. And you can see when we turn it off, I mean, what a difference there. That's our footage, and that's our footage now. Like, it just has such a cool look to it. It really just brings it to life, and it really makes it look like a true film and film stock. So you can see I have some other clips here. I have the clips of the actress sitting down, and she's, they're kind of flirty here. And I can copy this as just kind of a start. But we can see that this maybe doesn't totally match. So let's kind of jump in and let's try some different stuff. So exposure compensation is not bad. First off, I want to warm this shot up a little bit. I feel like this needs to be warmer. So let's try some different films. Let's see what we got here. Let's just kind of, what about gold 200? Okay, gold 200 looks nice. Let's try some wild ones down here. Ooh, the black and white would be cool. There's some, that is nice, but I don't know if it matches. I would usually use something like that probably. I just don't know if it matches what we're doing right now. Let's try some Ektar. Okay, I kind of like that. So let's do the black point, and let's try the analyze current frame. So that's giving you what it assumes. And then let's bring this one down a little bit. Let's make it nice and contrasty. And for instance, let's kind of bring that up a hair, bring the exposure down a touch, contrast up, or actually, no, let's bring the exposure back up a little bit. Now let's mess with these. I'm not crazy about so this is what it looks like without that. Let's bring those reds out just a hair, and I want to get rid of that green. But let's bring the blue back. Not that much, maybe. Let's bring that saturation down a touch. Cool. Okay, that looks really good, and that looks much better. Let's turn off film grain for right now, and I want to show you what the halation's not doing much in this one. Actually, let's bring that magenta out just a hair. It's a little bit. That's not bad. Just want to get rid of some of that green. And obviously we have some of the blooming on, which you can see works in some of these highlights. If I bring that way up, you can really see, and you can see what it's working on. So that looks pretty good. I might go back and bring the exposure up just a touch. I might try to push the film. And let's go back and let's do some grain. Let's make a lot of grain, but like really tight grain. Go down. Bring it down to those mid. Okay, cool. So we have kind of a nice looking image right there, right? So you can see that's our image. We're going to grab a still, and that's our image before. Huge difference, and it just makes it look like that much more filmic. And if we go to this last shot here, I just wanted to show kind of an outdoor scene. Here's some water, and let's just copy this one over just for a second. Now, obviously that's way too blue for my liking. So I'm just going to make sure I'm going to go daylight here so that way it's balanced. And let's actually just reset this whole thing. So we're going to bring it back to the square one, choose our camera. Let's go through, go to film. Definitely want to bring the exposure up, probably to about there. It's definitely an underexposed shot, so I want to keep it similar. Let's check some different films for this because we could definitely play with some stuff. I feel like if we were actually shooting this, we'd probably shoot 250. Well, actually, it'd probably be like a higher speed film. We're like a Portra 400. That's kind of cool. Let's try Portra 400. Let's analyze. Whoops. No, we don't want to do that. Let's bring those shadows really way down. Let's bring that white point way down. Let's try to add a little more contrast. Let's do here in the print, let's bring that up and then add contrast back in. So that looks pretty nice. So you can see just with that, we have a nice looking image that has a nice blue look to it. Then we can pull the blue back just a hair, and I probably want to shift it a little bit more with those reds in there. Let's bring the exposure up just a touch too. Nice. And this is where film grain I feel like really shines. Let's bring it like right about there. Cool. We can add the halation because we have like those headlights over there, which I think looks nice. You can see if we did that, we'd want to do something like that, a little diffusion up. And let's go down to blooming. Let's see mask mode if we have anything that's blooming. Nope. So let's just get rid of that and not even use it. Cool. And yeah, I mean, what a big difference that is. You can see on his face. I mean, that's what we started with. And that's got that really nice film grain you can see there. How awesome does that look? And you can really see in the lights over here the halation. So you can see where those just look so nice, and even the blooming too there. Yeah. So just a true way to emulate film. And that's the thing about Dehancer that I've been super impressed with is the amount of thought that has gone into each feature, like pushing and pulling the film, and obviously the grain, the halation, the blooming, all that kind of stuff. Those are the little details that can really sell making a film look. Now, of course, it all depends on your footage too, but if you were using something like anamorphic lenses or something like that, you could really, really get an incredible film look. And with Dehancer Pro, I've been super, super impressed, and I definitely cannot recommend it enough. Honestly, I would go out there and say it is by far the best film emulation that you can find, and the flexibility and the amount of customization it has is just out of this world. So anyway, guys, definitely if you were thinking about checking out Dehancer, check out the link down in the description below. Again, I can't recommend it enough. You can see it's been really fun, and it's fun to play with too, just to go in, try the different stocks, of course, the black and white, all that kind of stuff. So again, be sure to check out that description or that link down in the description below. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later.